This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Teider. My guest today is Dr. Mara Harvey. Mara has a doctorate in political economy. And as I just learned, for past 1 years, she held very high positions at a big international bank. And she just recently left the bank to educate girls and women about money and finances. And I'm super excited about this. I've met Mara at an international conference for women. And I immediately, when I heard her talk, I thought, oh, I wish Mara would be my guest. And only then I learned that Mara actually wrote books to educate girls about money. And that fit even better. That made me even more excited about Mara, because one of the most important questions I ask my guests is always, what do you wish your mother has taught you? And the answer I get most often to this question is either about sex or about finances. And it's very hard to find somebody to teach us about finances. So I'm excited, Mara, that you're here. Welcome.
Thank you, Anna, for having me. It's delightful to be here to talk to you today.
Mara, tell me about it. Tell me about how you decided to dedicate your time and your energy and your very extensive knowledge of finances and banking to educate girls about it.
With pleasure. So I've been working in the financial industry for 21 years, and I spent, let's say, the last 7 years focusing in particular on why is it that finance has not done a great job of embracing women. And I mean this from two angles. One, clearly female talent within the financial industry, but even more importantly, I realized that we were neglecting women as investors. All the conversations were largely with male clients considered to be the wealth creators, and women often perceived to just be the members of the family that married into wealth, or maybe they had some small wealth themselves, but they were not the main creators of family wealth. And I found this quite striking, and I said, look, I think we're missing a trick here. I think if women are not at the table on par to the men, regardless of how much of the family wealth they've created or inherited or shaped in any other way through their contribution to family life, I think women deserve a seat at the table. And this led me to actually initiate and launch what became a global transformation program within the company I was working for that actually sparked industry debate industry-wide. And there was a real recognition of the fact that finance had neglected women and women's needs and women's concerns. So that led me to asking myself, well, what is different for women? What is it they want from a financial services provider? And long story short, so many women simply said, look, interacting with a bank isn't fun. Take away the complexity, make it engaging, and especially, could you please take me seriously? I don't want to be mansplained to. I don't want to be spoken down to. I want a conversation which is really on eye level. So that's what I set out to do. But on that journey, I also realized that this has not just got to do with changing the entire user experience within the financial industry. The problem ran deeper. The problem really was that at the core, the way we speak about money to men and the way we speak about money to women is different. And what really shocked me, to sum it up, is to realize that bias starts super early. And the way we realize that is because there are statistics showing that pay gaps are visible in children's pocket money.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. When I found that out, I was just shocked. I was like, I've got to do something about this.
So parents give different amounts of pocket money to boys versus girls.
Yes. Now, in part, you can argue this is not because parents discriminate intentionally against their daughters. But all of those societal biases that we see in labor markets are actually visible in society. So the fact that girls get steered towards more unpaid work and boys get rewarded for being bold and creative and entrepreneurial, all of those traits are visible in daily life. And statistically, it adds up. The girls are getting paid less already by the age of 10. So that's really what made me want to leave my job in finance to really focus on this topic, to focus on how do I empower girls to have a better conversation on money? How do I empower, by the way, all the boys to realize that we need to make the world more fair? But very importantly, in order to take the kids on this journey, we need to take the parents on this journey. So it really is about financial parenting.
That's super, super exciting. So you wrote 5 books for children, and
Indeed.
they each have a topic. Will you tell me about them?
With pleasure. So it's a series of 5 books. The series is called A Smart Way to Start. And the first book talks about earning money and equal pay. The second book is about saving, and it explains to children why money in a piggy bank doesn't grow. You can fill it, but your money is not growing. You need something else for that.
I need to read that book as well.
Excellent. You know, the sweetest thing ever is the photos of kids that parents send me after their daughters or sons have read book 2, and they say, I want you to take me to the bank to open a bank account. And I'm like, yay, another child growing up financially confident. Then book 3 goes on to talk about spending and the important choices and trade-offs that we have to make when we spend our money. Book 4 is about explaining to children that their money choices are going to impact our world. Because when we spend our money, we're giving our money away to a company. And we are empowering that company to grow. And are they doing good things or not so good things for the planet? And I really wanted children as a young age to understand they have a voice and every single choice they make matters. And hopefully the parents will realize that their choices matter too and will also be motivated to make really good choices for the future of our planet. And the 5th book explains, well, what is the world's to-do list? What does the world need? Which choices do we need to make for what reason to help fix what is ailing our planet at the moment? So it's a book on the 17 SDGs, and it's all in rhymes. All the 5 books are in rhymes.
And beautiful, beautiful art. I'm in love with the art.
So am I. I think my illustrator is a genius,
Yes,
and I've
absolutely.
loved working with her so much.
Yes.
Actually, I have to point this out. She is so talented. Her name is Mariajo Ilustrajo. That's her artist name. And she just won last year the World Illustrators Award.
Oh,
for new talent.
congratulations. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. It's really beautiful. And Mara, we are going to put a link to your website in the episode notes. So if any parents out there who are listening are interested to buy the book, they can buy the books on your website. Will you just say it?
The website is smartwaytostart.com.
Okay. And we'll put a link there.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited about what you're doing. You know, I'm listening to all these women complain how their moms were not able to teach them about financing and money and handling money and investing. And then we talk about, but of course they weren't able to teach me that because they didn't know it themselves. And there's this vicious circle of that you are now trying to break. And I think our new generation is trying to break. Mothers simply have to face the money and teach their daughters about it, you know? It,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
No, it is so important because our attitudes to money are actually shaped in early childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our money attitudes are shaped by age 7.
Mm.
So if you haven't been influenced by your parents with regards to money matters by that age, it's going to be much harder later on.
And Mara, you have a daughter or two daughters?
I
I
do.
forgot. You have one daughter?
I have one daughter and one son.
One son. And your daughter helped you. She was reading the books as you were writing it. And I read somewhere she said at one point, Mom, I don't speak bank. Did she? So
Absolutely.
she helped you to translate the bank
She
language. That's
definitely.
very cute.
She definitely helped me a lot, and it was very endearing, but it was also eye-opening. It was eye-opening because exactly what women were complaining about, right? They said, look, it's not fun to engage with a bank. It's not on eye level. Well, I realized that despite all of my efforts, I also wasn't communicating on eye level, and especially if I wanted to communicate to children. So my daughter's feedback was very precious to realize we have to demystify everything that has got to do
We
with
do. We
finance.
do. We do. But Mara, let's talk about your mom. We are here to
Yeah.
learn from Mom Vera.
Yeah.
So you are half Swiss and half British, am I correct? Okay, so
Exactly.
Mom Vera was Swiss and your
Swiss.
father was
And my
British.
dad was British.
Okay, tell me a little bit about her.
So my mom was, I would say, a very passionate and determined person. I remember her telling me that she taught herself languages, and we're talking 1950s, 1960s. There were no apps. The only thing you could do was buy a book. There weren't people around you that you could just practice with. And yet she taught herself languages so that she would be able to work as a secretary and translator, doing a lot of translations from Italian to English or German to French. And she spoke 4 languages fluently, but she was autodidact. And I think, looking back, that's quite admirable. Not an easy feat.
Mara, Switzerland is officially has 4 languages, but
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that everybody in Switzerland speaks 4 languages.
No, I think today, though, of course, you encounter many more multilingual people. But if you rewind 50 years, that was not the case. I remember even as a child, so I grew up in England. My mother had moved to England after she married my dad. I grew up in England for the first 10 years of my life, and then we moved back to the Italian part of Switzerland. And we had to, of course, change schools. But not a single person, not even the school director, and this was the 80s, spoke a single word of English. Nobody.
Oh wow.
Yes, so it was completely a different context than it is today, where multilingualism is kind of taken for granted, and everybody speaks English, and everybody can at least communicate on a basic level. When my mum was growing up, that certainly wasn't the case.
And which part of Switzerland? What was her native tongue?
She had grown up in Zurich.
Okay.
So Swiss German was her native
yeah.
tongue. And then she had this strong desire to go to Ticino, the Italian part, because she wanted to live in a place that is just sunnier and warmer and learn about the Italian culture. And that is why she taught herself Italian, and also then business communication level Italian, in order to be able to work with that language. So she was quite brave and adventurous.
Did she get a job working in?
She did. And she lived for many years in Ticino before she moved to England.
So she met your dad, got married, moved to England. How many children did she have?
Myself and my sister, excuse me. So 2.
And how did she like England? Was it hard for her to get used to it?
Um, I think it wasn't easy. And especially she stopped working when my sister, who's a little bit older than me, she's 18 months older than me, was born. And I came along a little later. And while my mother was in England, she wasn't working. And again, consider, this was the 70s. It wasn't so easy for non-native people to obtain work permits, even if she had wanted to work. So, yeah, she was working at home. She supported my dad, of course, who was an entrepreneur, and assisted him wherever she could with administrative tasks and so on. But she wasn't officially employed while she was in England.
Did you live in the countryside or in London?
We did, in the countryside, in Buckinghamshire, in a tiny little corner of the world called Lane's End.
Oh, nice.
Yes, it was very charming.
Nick is always telling me about British countryside and is dreaming of moving there one day. I'm very scared. It could feel lonely. I'm not used to living in the countryside, so
I think at the time where we were living, there probably were more cows than inhabitants.
Exactly.
So it really was countryside. Today it's a little more developed, but back then there wasn't much around.
And so what happened to Mama Vera? Last time we talked, you told me about a divorce and how hard it was for her.
Indeed. Unfortunately, when I was about 10 years old, so my mom was about 50 years old, my parents went through a very nasty, sudden separation. Literally from one day to the next. My mom was out shopping. She just dropped us at school. And she came home and found the house half empty. So my dad had just decided to move out without telling anybody anything. And he basically had a new partner and decided to go. Yeah.
And she was in his country. She was in a foreign country,
yes,
all by herself with 2 children. And he just left.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that must have been like a terrible shock for my mom. And it's hard enough to deal with if you have a support system around you at your fingertips. But her mother and her sister were living in Switzerland and were far away. And she was literally left from one day to the next to figure out life all alone without having her own income and without having really access to any financial resources. So she did the only thing that she could do, which was get us out of the country and back home to Switzerland. So literally, she organized flights. Within a matter of 48 hours, we were gone. It was tough for us because we didn't have even time to say goodbye to our friends or anything. And of course, I think my sister dealt with it worse than I did. She was in her early teens, 12 turning 13. That's a tough age. For me, it was tough, but, you're kind of still a little kid and you don't really see the bigger scheme of things at the age of 10 or 11. But if I now, at the age of 50, look back and say, my mum was my age when she faced this situation, I can imagine how hard it must have been for her to just say, okay, we've got to act. What are we going to do? And the only logical step was, I need to go back home where I have a support system.
What an incredible story. Women are heroes. I'm sorry to say it that way, but I can't imagine how hard it is being 50. And then you have to deal with the heartache and with the disappointment and betrayal. But in the same time, you have to act and protect your children and figure things out at the age of 50.
Yes. Yeah. And my mother had an additional difficulty to overcome, which was, I can't remember exactly which year it was, but a few years before, she had spinal surgery because of a slip disc. Now, this was one of the very first spinal surgeries performed in the UK. And actually, the operation went okay, but not perfectly because it left her lame in one leg. They cut a nerve by accident. So she also had a physical disability that made it harder for her to be able to find employment.
That's incredible. So what did she do?
So she went back home. She went to Switzerland and she asked her mother and her sister for help. So literally, I stayed with my mother at her mother's house, with my grandmother, and my sister, because at my grandmother's house, the flat was too small. It was a tiny little 2-bedroom flat. And my sister stayed with my mother's sister, so her aunt, our aunt. And that for a few months, I can't remember how many months it was, but for a few months until my mum was capable of getting all the documents and everything in order to be able to search for employment and then finally find employment. And she could only work half time because of her spinal injury. She couldn't sit very long because otherwise she'd be in pain. And then when she finally had a job, she could afford to get a little flat where we could all move in and be together again with my sister and I. But it was a very conflictual period because I think my sister never forgave my mom for what she did, meaning that she tore us away from our home, our friends, our school, but also our family, because, we didn't have contact with our dad afterwards, nor with the extended family in England. And there was no Facebook, right? There was no way for a 12-year-old child or 10-year-old child to stay in touch with relatives. If you didn't have their phone numbers and their addresses, there was no way you could do anything. So you were completely cut off. So yeah, and then having for us to learn a new language. I mean, we were lucky that our mother spoke Italian fluently because in the meanwhile, I told you my mum had grown up in Zurich, but also her mother and her sister had moved to the Italian part. So when she moved back to Switzerland, she moved to the Italian part. And so my sister and I were catapulted into an Italian-speaking school, and we didn't understand anything.
Oh, wow.
It was rather entertaining.
Now you say it's entertaining. I can imagine back then it was very difficult.
It was a little bit daunting, yes.
Yeah.
But, as kids go, I think that's the beautiful thing. You learn a language within 3 months.
Yes, absolutely. I see Kai now with German. It's amazing how quickly it goes.
It is.
Wow, so you all learned your lessons through all of that.
Yeah.
Big life lessons.
Yeah, and I guess that is where the whole topic of financial security and financial independence really came to the forefront.
Is this why you went to study economics, I guess? Or
actually,
finances?
No, it's not the reason. But there is an interesting anecdote behind that choice as well. I wanted to study chemistry. And I told my mom, I'd really like to study chemistry. And she said, you need to do a job that is going to give you financial security in life. And if you study something like economics, you can work in pretty much any industry. But if you study chemistry, you can only work in the pharma industry. And so she convinced me not to study pharma and to study something much more generic, which I've never regretted, but it was interesting how her experience in life really influenced the sense of direction she wanted to give me, and not let me follow my passion, strictly speaking, but make me follow a path that would always be a good, backup plan in life.
I always admire it when I hear that moms directly took a lesson out of their own experience and passed it on to their daughters. I think as mothers, that's what we need to do. Before we jump into her lessons, tell me what happened to her.
Yes, so she continued working all the rest of her life in Ticino and managed to put enough money aside to buy a little house.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Kind of lived there happily ever after until late into her 80s, where for health reasons, she then was in a retirement home the last 2 years of her life. But I think she managed to, land on her feet. I think it was a very difficult time for her, but she literally just pulled up her sleeves. She was very determined. She was very she was very strong-willed, and she wanted to be independent and to just live her little comfortable life with her flowers in her little garden and just enjoying very basic things in life, but knowing that nobody would ever be able to put her in a situation where she was going to be that vulnerable ever again.
How important is that? Isn't that a huge thing to learn?
It is.
It's a huge thing to learn. Did she ever have a partner again, or was she happy by herself?
She was happy by herself, although I think she was lonely. But I think her trust and her ability to trust another person was so broken. It was so broken after that experience that I think she just chose to never trust anybody again, which is sad. Which is very sad.
It is sad. It takes a lot of repair work to do on yourself to be able to trust again, as you say.
Yeah.
Let yourself go again. Wow, I think we already learned a lot from all of this, Mara. What a life, and what a big lesson. But let's go into what you feel you've learned from her.
So, financial security, above all, was probably the most relevant takeaway. My mum was always saying, you need to be independent. You need to have your own money. She knew what it meant to end up in life without a safety net. And she learned that the hard way, probably in the most brutal possible way. And, had my father passed away, had my father ended up in hospital for illness, or, any circumstances would have left her without an income, that's one thing. But for the person that you've loved and trusted and given up your career to just walk out on you from one day to the next without warning and leave you without a bank account, without a penny, without anything, with no resources to call your own. And I think that lesson was such a hard lesson for her and such a disappointment that it was part of what she would literally tell us every single day. You have to work hard and you need to be independent. Yeah.
And you both did?
Yeah. We both did. Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. It was funny, though. My mother, maybe because of all of these damaged relationships, she really struggled to say, well done. So no matter how well I did at school, in Ticino, grades used to go from, call it 2 to 6 or 1 to 6, but nobody ever got 1. So from 2 to 6, 6 was the best grade. And I was a pretty good student. So I had pretty much all 6s and maybe a couple of 5s. And my mum really struggled to tell me, well done. She would just focus on the 5s and tell me you should work harder.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was trying not to spoil you, huh? Or something like that.
I think she was just trying to motivate me to continue to work hard and to not kind of rest or lay back simply because you did well.
Yeah.
And I think it was only the day that I got my PhD when I was 28 years old or so that she, for the first time in her life, was capable of telling me, I'm proud of you.
Oh. But at least she did. I'm glad you heard that from her. At least once. Yeah, she did. She did.
Absolutely.
Tell me more. Anything else you learned from her?
Oh, absolutely. Lots of other things. I think I really learned from my mother the love of nature and plants and flowers, even though I'm terrible with plants. I always buy plants and I end up killing them because I'm so bad at watering them the right amount. But I love gardens. I love botanical gardens. I love just watching the trees change color with the seasons and the beauty of spring when everything is in blossom. And I think that deep appreciation from nature and for flowers really comes from my mother.
Why do you think that's important, Mara?
I think it's important because we tend to rush through our lives going from one meeting to the next meeting. And at least I've really spent 21 years of my life putting my work in front of everything else. And I loved my work. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't forced to do that. It was my genuine passion for what I was doing. But, you know, when COVID hit, it was the first time that I would get up in the morning and I would walk to work and I would actually realize how beautiful the city I was living in was, how beautiful the trees were, how many flowers were in blossom in spring. And I'd never taken time to really look at it because you're just running around with your mobile phone and checking your next meeting and your next meeting and the next email and the next WhatsApp. And in that moment, and that was actually then the spring that my mother passed away, in that moment, I realized that there really is something bigger and more important than just chasing a career.
How freeing is that, Mara, isn't it?
It is. It is. And it's beautiful because I guess it comes as a stage of my life where, thanks to my mother, I have created that financial safety net for myself that I know come hell or high water, you know, I just need to take care of myself. The kids are kind of taken care of and, you know, and you feel like that is massive freedom. And to now be able, you know, at age 50 to say, I think I'm going to spend the next decade of my life choosing the things I want to engage in. How do I want to spend my time? And I wouldn't have the liberty to do that, nor the appreciation of just how important it is to make space in your life for this, had it not been for my mother.
I'm sure she's very proud of you. You did learn her main lesson.
I did. I try. Maybe at the time I didn't realize it, but certainly looking back, I'm grateful.
Yeah. And then I have a bunch of practical lessons that you mentioned as things you learned.
All the fun things. So my mother used to love to sew. When we were little children, she used to make all of our pretty little frocks and dresses, and they were so charming. And so she taught both my sister and me to sew, to embroider, to crochet, to knit. And I really enjoy these things. I don't have that much time for them. But I like the fact that, you know, if one day I'm going to have grandkids, I'm going to spend lots of time knitting little jumpers for them, especially because when you're knitting for babies, you know, you can kind of get a pullover done within a week. If you're doing it for an adult, it might take a month or two. Yeah.
And you still remember all of this because my grandma taught me and I forgot everything.
Okay. No, I do. And I do actually enjoy it. And occasionally I will, you know, knit things like, you know, little Christmas stockings and decorations and things like that.
It's work with hands that's so important.
It is.
Using your hands because you are in such an intellectual environment in banking you were. So I guess it's a beautiful, beautiful balance to be able to create things with your hands as well. My mom was an amazing sewer. She made the most amazing dresses for her and me and also knitting and everything. And when I asked her to teach me, she didn't want to. She said, no, she said, look, you'll pay somebody to do that for you. You don't need to do it. And I'm very, very sad. I bought a sewing machine and she did manage to teach me a little bit. I can do some basic things, but I'm very sad I'm not more capable of doing things with my hands, of creating things.
Yeah. There's something terribly rewarding about creating something with your own hands.
Yes. I feel that when I write my books, you know, or articles when I'm writing, I think I'm close to that. And what about the Christmas turkey?
Absolutely. So I was talking about knitting Christmas stockings and things like that. I have a huge passion for Christmas. And again, this was for my mother always a very special family moment. And she used to cook a wonderful Christmas turkey. Apparently, she learned that from my dad. My dad never cooked except on Christmas Day. He would make the turkey. And my mum learned from him how to make the turkey. And she kept on making us Christmas turkey every year as long as we were living at home with her. And I love Christmas turkey. It's just one of those absolutely wonderful traditions, which I'm now passing down to my kids as well.
Oh, they're learning now. Are you teaching them to crochet and to sew as well?
Yes, my daughter does indeed love to knit and crochet.
Wow.
Sewing a little less, and embroidering doesn't seem to be her passion, but she does occasionally grab the knitting needles and sit on the couch and knit away.
Oh, fun. It's going from generation to generation.
It is.
Apropos your father, I'm sorry, I'm curious. Did you ever meet him after the divorce?
I never saw him again, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay,
and he passed away now some 20 years ago, but I never had a chance to see him again.
Let's go back to Mama Vera and the trick question.
Yeah.
Were the things you wish she was able to teach you? Were the things she was not able to teach you that you had to teach yourself?
Yeah. So I think the first one really has got to do with the financial aspect. My mother was certainly hell-bent on instilling in us a sense of you need to save, you need to be financially independent. But she was not capable of giving us any insights into the world of investing, because I think that was a world that she herself had never explored, didn't feel that she ever had enough savings to invest, and yet she would have. And me, of course, as a banker, looking back on all of this, and I think about all the decades of missed opportunity for value creation. And I see that over and over and over again for so many women who sit on, women tend to save but not invest. And this is also what marked my career in finance, to say, look, we need to get all the women investing as well. This is such a missed opportunity. And I really wish my mum had been able to teach me about investing earlier on in life. And she wasn't, simply because she herself was not literate when it came to investing. And it was as simple as that. And what you don't know, you can't teach.
Yeah, exactly.
So this has also marked, though, my pathway, wanting to make sure that we can make the world of money and the world of finance accessible to every person out there. And I came across so many women in my career in finance who said, look, I'd like to get more engaged, but I actually don't know where to start. And together with my colleagues, we actually wrote a whole financial confidence manual that really answered the question for people where to get started, because it is so important that people learn to optimize their finances for the long term.
What is that called, Mara? Can people buy that on Amazon?
No, that particular handbook isn't available on Amazon, I'm afraid. It was a document that was created for the bank.
Oh, okay. That's a shame.
Yes, nonetheless, exactly. Nonetheless, I also wrote a book for adults where you will find a lot of references in there on these topics, which is called Women and Risk. And
Women and Risk. Okay.
It's specifically for women, but actually it can be very useful to any person who says, I really need to start thinking about money. What do I need to start thinking about? Too often, when women think about investing, they think about the risk of stock market volatility and losing money in the short term, right? That's what people think about when they think risk.
Yeah. Yep.
And my whole book is an effort to say that's really not what should keep you up at night. The biggest risk that you're taking is not investing. And not optimizing your wealth creation over your lifetime, because your quality of life after retirement will largely depend on it. So we need to rethink what risk is all about. So the book, Women and Risk, Rewriting the Rules, is available on Amazon if anybody would like to read that.
Yeah, great. And we have one last lesson that you mentioned as something you wish your mom taught you.
Yes, I wish my mum would have taught me, I would say, how to let go of grudges. Unfortunately, as I said before, my mum was so disappointed by the separation and divorce. And it was one of those War of the Roses
Mm-hmm.
divorces, right? It
Mm-hmm.
really became a turf fight, which was horrible.
Mm.
Um, but of course, she held a grudge on that for life. That's also why she wasn't capable of um, finding another partner and restarting a new relationship. And also with my sister, her relationship and my sister's was very conflictual, and it
Mm.
stayed conflictual for life. They were basically both of them so stubborn, they were not capable of forgiving each other.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I just felt that, wow, life's too short for that, honestly. But obviously, my mum, she grew up with a mentality of children should be seen but not heard.
Mm-hmm.
She grew up in the war, right? She grew up in a period where youngsters, young children, young adults didn't have a say. You were just
Mm-hmm.
there to do as you were told. So emotional intelligence was not necessarily a key strength of that generation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a shame for her. I think she carried way too much pain with her for way too long. And at the same time, it didn't make me particularly good at dealing with conflict when I was younger. And I think it's only due to all of the leadership training that I did over the course of my 21 years
Mm-hmm.
that I think I have become a bit wiser for it.
I just wanted to ask you, how did you learn it? It's such a difficult thing to learn.
Yeah, it is. And, I think my son could write a book on what a terrible mother I was for the first 10 years of his life, because that was, my early days of my career.
Yeah.
And it was probably around the age where he was 9 or 10, and I was some, 8 years into my career that I started some serious leadership training because I was assigned responsibility for large teams.
Yeah.
And that's where I realized, oh my goodness, there are so many things I need to do better. And I
Mm.
think then my children also benefited somewhat. But let's say that a little bit of damage has been done along the way.
Mm.
I wasn't too kind all
Mm.
the time.
But at least you're aware of that now.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And it's sad. There's no school for parenting.
There's no
Nobody
school for
teaches you how to
parenting.
do this.
There's no school. But now you are my 82nd interview.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
and one of the biggest things I've learned through these interviews and talking to all these women, and again from they are literally from all around the world and from different backgrounds and religions and cultures and everything. One of the biggest parenting lesson I've learned is how much a simple admission to our children that we did or we're doing our best is, how much it means. Women often say, the day my mom came and said, listen, I know I made mistakes, but I want you to know I did the best I could, and
Mm-hmm.
just as simple as that, just saying
Yeah.
that and acknowledging that we are not perfect and that, yes, we made mistakes, but how much we love them and that it came from the best place. As I'm learning through the interviews, that's kind of an extremely, extremely important thing.
I agree with that so much.
Yeah.
And for me, one of my takeaways was also I told my children all the time, and I still do, how proud I am of them
Yes. Yeah.
because I missed that as a
Mm-hmm.
child. And
Mm-hmm.
I know my mom was proud of me, but she
Mm-hmm.
never was capable of really saying it out
Mm-hmm.
loud.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important. Kids just need to hear that and know that no matter
Yes.
whether they succeed or fail at something, no
Yeah.
matter whether they do great school grades or they struggle, that we are proud of who they are. And I always told my kids, I said, as long as you grow up to be nice people,
Mm-hmm. A
I
kind
think I
person.
will
Yeah.
have done my job as a mother. And for whatever
Mm.
you choose to do in life, just go through life gracefully.
Mm.
And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's that sense of being able to let go and knowing that indeed you are doing your best, and it's never going to be perfect, but doing your best is pretty damn good already.
It is. Mara, thank you so much. This was such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you, Anna. It was entirely my pleasure.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention that we forgot to talk about or mention?
I think the thing that I'm also most grateful to my mother for is the fact that when I was 18, I wanted to buy a motorbike, and I had saved up some money, but it wasn't, I'd worked during my school holidays and so on in order to be able to earn some money and save it. But the motorbike still cost more than what I had. And my mom totally surprised me because she took me to the motorbike dealer and paid the difference and said, we're going to buy you that motorbike.
Wow.
And my mom couldn't have been more afraid of bikes or so. I don't think she ever sat on a bike in her life, but she did that for me. And looking back, I feel like I think she deeply understood what that bike meant to me. And it was her way of showing me, you know, I'm here for you. I'm going to back you up. Even though, again, she was never capable of expressing that in words. But that day I knew, wow, what a cool mom I have.
Oh, that's beautiful. Did you love that bike?
I loved that bike.
How long did you,
every minute.
How long did you have it?
I think I had that bike through my university years. So I must have had it some 7 years in total. After university, I was still doing my PhD in Fribourg. So yeah, until my son was born. And afterwards, when I was pregnant, I felt like, okay, now I can't ride a motorbike anymore.
I love it that you rode a motorbike. That makes you even cooler than you are.
I still do.
You really? That's amazing.
That's another little funny anecdote to close. So on my 45th birthday, I was sitting with my son and my daughter outside. It was April, sunny weather, and you could hear all the motorbikes going past. It was by the lake. And I told my kids, it's like, oh, I really wish I had a motorbike. And my son just looks at me and he says, Mom, what's stopping you? And so we went that same afternoon to buy another motorbike because I hadn't driven one in 20 years since my son had been born. It was fun.
Great.
It was very fun.
Mara, let's just recap. I love just recapping at the end. We said that the biggest lessons were, of course, financial independence. And I love the lesson of plants and nature, which we talked about how they actually remind us that the love for nature reminds us that there's something bigger and more important than our mundane things, such as a career.
Indeed.
And then I love it how grateful you are for all the practical things she taught you to knit and crochet and do things with your hands and to cook a great turkey.
Yes.
And then talking about what you wish she was able to teach you was how to invest. And I love how you connected it to both her experiences and also to what you do today. And how to let go, especially of grudges, how to release the ugly things from our life. That's a very big one.
Yeah, indeed. That sums it up nicely.
Great. Mara, thank you again. I'm very excited about our conversation.
Thank you, Anna. It was such a pleasure. And I'm sitting here with the sun shining upon me, really enjoying these special moments, thinking about my mom, who has now not been with me for just over a year. She passed away in April last year. And it's beautiful memories. So thank you for helping me remember her.
I'm sorry about your loss, but she's here with me and we're all learning from her, and that's beautiful.
Indeed.
Did I say
Thank
with
you
me?
So much.
I wanted to say with us, but I said with me. She's with me right now. Hello, Dr. Freud.
She's with us all.
She's with us all.
Lovely.
If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyouMama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider, that's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.